So, as a follow-up to the arrest of Julian Assange, here is his op-ed, which was published in the Australian yesterday. I'm going to read this word for word because I really don't think that Julian Assange is too much concerned with copyright of his material. And thanks to the Australian for publishing that op-ed. In 1958, a young Rupert Murdoch, then owner and editor of Adelaide's The News, wrote, "In the race between secrecy and truth, it seems inevitable that truth will always win." His observation perhaps reflected his father, Keith Murdoch's, expose that Australian troops were being needlessly sacrificed by incompetent British commanders on the shores of Gallipoli. The British tried to shut him up, but Keith Murdoch, the father of the present Murdoch, would not be silenced, and his efforts led to the termination of the disastrous Gallipoli campaign. Nearly a century later, WikiLeaks is also fearlessly publishing facts that need to be made public. I grew up in Queensland, in a country town where people spoke their minds bluntly. They distrusted big government as something that could be corrupted if not watched carefully. The dark days of corruption in Queensland government before Fitzgerald's inquiry are a testimony to what happens when politicians gag the media from reporting the truth. These things have stayed with me. WikiLeaks was created around these core values. The idea, conceived in Australia, was to use internet technologies in new ways to report the truth. WikiLeaks coined a new type of journalism, scientific journalism. We work with other media to bring people the news, but also prove what is true in the news and what is not. Scientific journalism allows you to read a news story, then click online to see the original document it is based on. That way you can judge for yourself, is the story true? Did the journalist report it accurately? Democratic societies need a strong media, and WikiLeaks is part of that media. The media helps keep government honest. WikiLeaks has revealed some hard truths about the Iraq and Afghan wars and broken stories about corporate corruption. People have said that I am anti-war. For the record, I'm not. Sometimes nations need to go to war, and there are just wars. But there is nothing more wrong than a government lying to its own people about those wars, and then asking these same citizens to put their lives and their taxes on the line for those lies. If a war is justified, then tell the truth, and the people will decide whether to support it or not. If you've read any of the Afghan or Iraqi war logs, any of the U.S. Embassy cables, or any of the stories about things WikiLeaks has reported, consider how important it is for all media to be able to report these things freely. WikiLeaks is not the only publisher of U.S. Embassy cables. Other media outlets, including Britain's The Guardian, the New York Times, Al Pay in Spain, and Der Spiegel in Germany, have published the same redacted cables. Yet it is WikiLeaks, as the coordinator of these other groups, that has copped the most vicious attacks and accusations from the US government and its acolytes. I have been accused of treason even though I am an Australian, not an American citizen. There have been dozens of serious calls in the US for me to be taken out by US Special Forces. Sarah Palin says I should be hunted down like Osama bin Laden. A Republican bill sits before the US Congress seeking to have me declared a transnational threat and disposed of accordingly. An advisor to the Canadian Prime Minister's office has called on national television for me to be assassinated. An American blogger has called for my 20-year-old son here in Australia to be kidnapped and harmed for no other reason than to get at me. And Australians should observe with no pride the disgraceful pandering to these sentiments by Prime Minister Gillard and US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have not had a word of criticism for the other media organizations. That is because The Guardian, the New York Times, Der Spiegel are old and large, and WikiLeaks is as yet young and small. We are the underdogs. The Gillard government is trying to shoot the messenger because it doesn't want the truth revealed, including information about its own diplomatic and political dealings. Has there been any response from the Australian government to the numerous public threats to violence against me and other WikiLeaks personnel? One might have thought an Australian Prime Minister would be defending her citizens against such things, but there have only been wholly unsubstantiated allegations. The Prime Minister and especially the Attorney General are meant to carry out their duties with dignity and above the fray. Rest assured, these two mean to save their own skins. They will not. Part 2 to follow.